Summer was ending, and the only sense of fall's imminent arrival was an occasional crisp breeze and occasional falling leaf. The sun was still plenty hot, though, and I decided to park my rusty beige Subaru beneath the shade of a large elm. My girlfriend, Danielle, got out and started up towards her apartment. We were both tired from our Sunday morning hike through the park, and I groaned a bit as I got out of the car. Across the street, a woman sat behind a small, foldable card table with some trinkets laid out on top. On the ground next to her were some large items, including 2 orange metal car ramps. I thought about how long it had been since I had changed the oil in my car, and the words of my dad saying, "That car will be part of the 300,000-mile club." A milestone that was slowly creeping up. I approached the table and eyed the ramps. The lady smiled up at me from her seat behind the table. She was in her late 50s and had wisps of silver in her black hair. She noted my attention towards the ramps and said, $40 for the pair. The $20 in my pocket consoled me in the fact that it probably wasn't meant to be. I'll think about it, I said, and that was the extent of the words we shared together. He hated the situation he was in. He hated how she reminded him of his daughter, and how he couldn't have her back. He hated the awkward necessity of the situation. He hated what his life had become. But it hadn't started out like that. He found a job up in New Hampshire, and his girlfriend said her mom lived there. It was a little weird moving in with his girlfriend's mom, but he needed a job, and he thought maybe, if they got along, it would be good for the relationship. And for a while, it did work. Her mom made dinner every now and then, while he kept things clean and was the occasional handyman. His girlfriend would come up every so often, and they'd all go out for a Mexican place that was in walking distance from the apartment building. Her mom would even let him borrow the old BMW when his car broke down. Though outside of these get-togethers, they didn't talk much. There was almost a professionalism to the situation. They both knew it was an arrangement of convenience, and when it was no longer convenient, things would change, which, of course, they did. First, his girlfriend broke up with him. They were apart too often, and it just wasn't working out. But her mom still needed a roommate to help with the bills, so things stayed as they were. Then he lost his job. His heartache left him depressed and careless, the latter of which his bosses didn't appreciate and kicked him to the curb. Then it was down to money. He said he would find another job, and in the meantime he would have unemployment, but it wasn't enough. Soon the quiet understanding they had between each other turned into occasional chides about his uselessness and his sullen demeanor. Then, finally, when he couldn't make rent for the second or third time, the tension which had been bubbling below the surface broke. All the words that they had kept to themselves were hurled at each other like stones. She fiercely whittled away at what was left of his fragile ego, and he attacked with anything he thought could hurt her. He had never been that angry before. It was freeing, in a way. Rain pattered on the roof and dripped down the windows. The dull gray light of the morning leaked into the room as the television whispered quietly. I was falling in and out of consciousness in the warmth of the bed. Danielle was sitting up reading a book with the covers over her legs, as if remembering something. She closed the cover, set the book down, and looked over at me. "Hey, do you remember that lady that used to have yard sales across the street?" I sleepily thought about the lady with wisps of silver in her hair. Yeah, I think so," I replied. "No one has seen her in a couple of weeks, and I guess some of the neighbors have seen her roommate driving around in her car." Danny always loved a good mystery. She's probably out visiting someone, like a family member or something," I said dismissively and half asleep. "Maybe," she said. I rolled over and looked out the window at the apartment building across the street. It was a small, white, 2-story building with an open balcony on the second floor. The small lawn in front, where she had sat weeks before, was vacant. The windows of the apartment where she used to live were dark and revealed no secrets. He never knew he could be so many things at once. He was tired, angry, scared, hungry, and so lonely. The stress of everything never abated and ate at him every single second. His stomach howled with pain, and he couldn't eat. He couldn't get his brain to turn off, nor could he dull the noise of his thoughts with drugs. Even all these days later, he swore he could still smell the paint and plaster he used. Everything was turned up to the point of distortion, and he wasn't sure he could take it anymore. Things didn't get better when he left. He knew the neighbors were looking at him more and more. The excuse that she was on vacation could only last maybe a week at most, and if her daughter started calling around, then maybe he would only have a few days. How much time did he have? The money he stole paid for a couple days at the motel, then he would have to go somewhere else. His best bet was Canada, but that would mean driving back through New Hampshire, where he knew they would be looking for him. He was a fugitive? This new part of his identity was so hard to reconcile. He knew some smaller criminals and had some brushes with the law himself, but this was the kind of thing that happened on television, where he could laugh at their foolishness and find glee at them getting caught. But there wasn't anything funny about his situation. He was on the wrong reality, and all he wanted to do was get back to the right one. The dark motel room was a temporary womb, where he could hide from everything, and as long as he didn't leave. He had been there for a few days, waiting to come to a decision on what to do next, or for someone to find him. He stayed up all night watching out the window, shivering every time a police car went by. It took days for him to finally sleep. He dreamt that he was back with his girlfriend and they were having dinner at the Mexican place down the street. Everything was pleasant and they were talking about the future. Maybe they would move in together. Maybe he'd get a better job back near her and things would be happy. The idea of these impossibilities snapped some of the lucidity into the dreams, and he knew in that nightmare logic what would happen next. The more he tried to fight it, the more he knew he would lose grip on his happy dream. "Where is my mother?" was all she had to say. He woke up in the motel room. Bright light cut through the cheap blinds, and he was fully in a sober reality of his life. It didn't take long for him to make a choice laying there. The only one that made sense to him. It wouldn't be justice, but it was something that had to be done. He picked up the phone and called her. I opened the window to let the smoke out, hoping she wouldn't notice. Some grease had dripped off of the baking sheet and burned on the elements of the stove. Danny might get stressed out by how I worked in the cramped kitchen with the old oven and the non-existent counter space, but she loved my chicken cordon bleu, or at least pretended to. Cold air spilled out of the open window as I looked out on the neighbors' houses. Orange lights and spiderwebs adorned porches and windows up and down the street. The soft lights of television screens illuminated rooms of strangers gathering around to watch ghosts safely in their home. Suddenly, Danny called out to me from the living room, and my instinct was to calm her down. "It's okay, just a little bit of smoke, that's all." I grabbed a towel and started trying to fan the smoke out of the window. "No, it's not that!" She got up, walked into the kitchen, and handed me her phone. "Look at this!" From Newsweek.com. Murder-suicide suspected after missing New Hampshire woman's body found. By Reuters on 10/12/15 at 4:49 p.m. New Hampshire authorities said on Monday that a body found stuffed behind a false wall in an apartment closet in Manchester is likely that of a woman who had been missing since last month. Police in the state's largest city discovered the body of a woman believed to be Sue Hutchison, 57, after family members reported a foul stench in the building where she lived. Hutchison and her roommate, Stephen Andrade, 36, went missing around September 20th. Last week, Andrade was found dead in a Massachusetts motel room, apparently from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, police said. Police have said Andrade had been dating Hutchison's daughter, had broken it off, but that he and the mother had remained roommates. Police believe that Andrade had been driving Hutchison's 2005 BMW, which was found last week in a neighboring New Hampshire town. Another vehicle belonging to Hutchison was found near her Manchester home shortly after their disappearance. The New Hampshire Attorney General's office said on Monday that it appeared like Andrade had killed Hutchison. Based on statements Andrade made shortly before he killed himself, it appears likely that he killed Sue Hutchison, concealed her body, fled, and then eventually killed himself, the Attorney General's office said in the statement. They released no motive for the alleged killing. An autopsy is to be performed on her body on Tuesday to conclusively determine her identity and the cause of death. Police discovered the body on Sunday evening after searching the building where Hutchison and Andrade lived. The body was found in a crawl space behind a false wall in the closet.